Let's break this bitch down. Act 1. Let's set some stuff up.
Our story begins by setting the tone of the film by having the Sony, Columbia, and Marvel logos glitch in and out while looking like pages from a comic book. We kick things off by introducing the current Spider-Man of the story's reality, and Peter Parker tells us his origin story. We all know it: bitten by a radioactive spider, became Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, etc., etc. He makes a point to say no matter how many hits he takes, he always gets back up, and that he's the only one who can protect New York since he's the one and only Spider-Man. We cut to Miles Morales chilling out, listening to music, avoiding packing up to go to a private school that he clearly doesn't want to go to. Miles passes by his old school, where he was obviously super popular and had tons of friends, then trips into the street because of an untied shoelace in front of a cop car that is driven by his dad. His dad, Jefferson Davis, tries to connect with his son, but Miles does the old "I'm too good for my extremely caring and loving parents" shtick that all teenagers do. Get ready for that one, Nigel. You're only a couple years away from that. At least he didn't tell his dad, "It's not my fault you don't have a life," like in Mom and Dad. It's like, just imagine this character hooting like Daffy Duck while being stabbed in the third act. Be a little bit of a twist.
I would pay good money to see that.
I do feel like we missed out on the Fruit Loops stuck to his dad's face, though, at the end of the movie.
He probably knows his way around a sawzall.
Yeah.
Because it saws.
No, he does live in Brooklyn. I don't know. How often do you have to use a sawzall in Brooklyn? It's called a super.
While all this is going on, we get a few little clues that something major is happening on the streets of New York that has been causing mild earthquakes, but Spider-Man is looking into it. Jefferson clearly doesn't think much of Spider-Man and his vigilante style of justice, but Miles is preoccupied with being embarrassed by his dad dropping him off, which is amplified when Miles doesn't say he loves him. So Jefferson tells him he has to say it back using his police radio megaphone thingy. Miles doesn't fit in at the new school, and he thinks it's full of elitist snobs, but when he's late for a class, he makes a joke about Einstein saying time is relative that makes a cute girl laugh, so, maybe it's not so bad after all. Miles fails a test on purpose in the hopes of getting kicked out of the school for geniuses, but the teacher knows exactly what he's doing, so she challenges Miles to write an essay about the type of person he wants to become. Miles sneaks out of his dorm to his uncle Aaron's, where Aaron tells Miles to make a move on the new girl. And it's clear Miles and Aaron have a much better relationship than Miles has with his dad, since Jefferson is by the book and stuffy, while Aaron is a cool guy from the streets with a checkered past. Aaron sees the graffiti tag Miles sketched out in a notebook and asks if Miles has thrown them up yet. He takes Miles to a hidden tunnel in the subway that he knows about because he did an engineering job down there. It's not sketchy. There's a Diddy joke in there, but we'll just leave it alone. Miles spray paints his artwork on the wall, and we catch our first glimpse of a glowing radioactive spider, clearly destined to bite Miles.
He, of course, knows about the tunnel because he's doing the engineer job for Kingpin. Spoilers.
Yeah. They never really say what Aaron does for his actual job. Mm-hmm. I mean, so it's funny. Is he an engineer or something that Miles wouldn't think is weird that he knows that there's this tunnel under the city?
Yeah, I feel like
it's probably something like that,
like a private contractor. Kind of reminds me of Vulture in Homecoming.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he doesn't have an actual job. He's just the Prowler, but he just says he does something else.
Yeah, yeah. Aaron guides his nephew through the process and helps him with the composition of the tag while we get teased by the spider almost biting Miles 12 times. Aaron says he and Jefferson used to do graffiti together back in the day, and Miles is shocked since his dad is always super uptight. By the way, in the comics, we should mention that Jefferson Davis was a SHIELD agent before becoming a cop, which is why Miles has his mom's last name instead of Davis. It was to protect his identity.
I was confused about that because I don't really know the full origin story, the official original origin story of is Jefferson Davis his stepdad or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even in the, I think in this movie and in the sequel, they say that his dad has the last name Morales. So it's he either had the last name Morales or he took his wife's last name.
Mm. Well, I mean, clearly her last name is Morales though.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe that was her maiden name and he took it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember.
Or
it's
his
been a
last
long
name
time
was
since
Morales.
I read the Miles Morales comics.
I'm talking about this movie though. The comic
yeah, in this
explanation
movie-
can be whatever. I think maybe in the comics he has a different last name, and Miles just has his mom's last name. But in this movie, in the sequel, they specifically say his name is Officer Morales. Like his last name is Morales. Yeah, and I think in the sequel when he's having the promotion party, they talk about it there. They mention it too.
I'm trying to remember too in the game in like the New York games if his dad had the same last name or not. But
so I think to avoid it being confusing to casual audiences, they just said his dad's last name is Morales.
Last name.
Yeah.
Plus, it's 2024. You don't always have to take the man's last name. I know I won't.
As we found out in Dream Scenario, or we'll find out when we talk about it, you can take your wife's last name.
Yeah, that's a great tie-in. That's a great not cliffhanger, but foreshadowing for next film.
Yeah. Well, second to next film. Yeah.
Sorry. We're doing Creed's next. Miles takes a picture of his artwork, and the spider finally bites him. But Miles just kind of like flicks it away, which was funny because they set it up all super dramatic, like he's gonna have a big reaction.
Yeah, that's great.
The next day, Miles wakes up feeling weird, and when he bumps into the new girl, she introduces herself as Gwanda rather than Gwen Stacy. Miles tries to do a cool guy shoulder touch thing his uncle Aaron taught him, but he ends up accidentally ripping out a chunk of Gwen's hair with his sticky spider touch. He's a teenager, though, so his hands could have been sticky for any number of other reasons. It's just puberty.
Yeah.
Miles freaks out and runs through the school while trying to get a handle on his new powers. Eventually, he walks on the side of the building and Gwen spots him. In his room, Miles realizes he's going through the same thing Spider-Man went through, so he runs to his Uncle Ben's... Oh, sorry. His uncle, wow. So he runs to his uncle...
You can make that a joke. His Uncle Ben. I mean, Aaron.
Yeah, to his Uncle Aaron's, but Aaron is out of town. Miles heads to look for the spider that bit him in the subway, and it glitches like crazy when he touches it. Miles senses something is wrong and ducks seconds before a window breaks behind him, and we see Peter Parker and Green Goblin battling while they talk about Spider-Man stopping a portal to another dimension from being opened.
One thing I was thinking about just now is like the Aaron relationship actually really feels like an uncle, whereas the Uncle Ben thing always feels like a father figure, like Uncle Ben took over as his father.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting take on it, like actually seeing the uncle character who dies, for spoilers, as an uncle rather than a father figure.
And I guess they don't really give us age, but you have to, age of Aaron, but you would assume it's younger than the typical Uncle Ben too. So there's a little, it's a little easier
Uncle
for
Ben
Miles
is
to relate.
always, I think, is more like grandfatherly.
Yeah, he's
father
always
figure
came off as a
into one,
grandfather
but-
figure, yeah.
I would say Aaron is probably like in his 30s or early 40s, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I assumed is he's probably...
He's the cool
late
uncle.
30s, 40s.
Yeah.
That a lot of people have,
Yep. Miles is accidentally pulled into the fight, and he runs into a giant opening where we see two jet engine looking things on each side of it. Miles falls into a hole, but Spider-Man senses him falling and rescues him. Peter senses Miles has the same spider sense he has and wants to show Miles the ropes after he finishes with Green Goblin. Miles agrees, and Spider-Man heads to destroy the machine, but he's stopped by another villain called the Prowler, and we see Kingpin activate the device, which creates an opening to 5 different dimensions. Green Goblin pushes Spider-Man into the beam of the collider, and we see multiple versions of Spider-Man appear on screen for a second. A huge explosion destroys the collider and sends the villains and Spider-Man flying. Miles finds Spider-Man in the rubble, and Peter gives him a USB stick that will destroy the machine and warns Miles that if the collider is activated again, everyone he knows and loves will die. Kingpin finds Peter in the rubble, and Spider-Man tells him using the collider won't bring back Wilson's family, which pisses Kingpin off, so he smashes Peter's head, killing this reality Spider-Man. There can only be one! Probably a joke none of the younger viewers will get.
So
Miles
There surprisingly has not been a Highlander reboot.
That's
there?
actually, yeah.
I thought Henry Cavill was going to be Highlander. I thought they were already planning that.
It would make sense.
Yeah.
But also Henry Cavill gets shafted on projects all the time. So,
True.
Yeah.
and not in the way that a lot of people would want to see, I think.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth?
Apparently, he's going to be doing a Voltron show for,
Yeah.
for
A live action
Amazon,
Voltron for
I think.
Netflix, I think. Is it
No,
Amazon?
I think it's Amazon because it's somebody. We're speculating like maybe it's part of his Warhammer deal with them is to like he also gets to be in a Voltron show or you know.
Yeah.
So,
So,
it's just
is he just going to play one of the?
I don't know. I think
Voltrons?
it's just he's cast like as a character and he's not like running the show like he's doing for the Warhammer thing, but it may just be like maybe they roped him in for star power. They're like, okay, well you can do whatever you want with Warhammer. We're going to use you in other projects, and Voltron's one of them. He probably likes Voltron. He's a nerd. So
I mean, I would love to see a Voltron, like a modern adaptation of Voltron that actually works. That'd be great. I feel like every time they try to adapt these, they just kind of ruin them.
yeah,
But,
we'll see.
I never saw the Netflix show, but it must not have done very well because it didn't last very long. So
Yeah, that was
I didn't even know there was a
easily-
Netflix show.
Easily my favorite show when I was a kid, and I had the whole set and put the tigers together to like make the Voltron. I was just like,
yeah,
like
enjoyed-
the most awesome freaking toy as a kid.
yeah. See, I enjoyed the show that they ripped off, Power Rangers. So I hate Voltron.
Yeah, I was the Power Rangers generation.
Ugh.
Yeah. Go Power Rangers. Anyways, Miles accidentally kicks something over, so Kingpin sends the Prowler to kill that guy. It's a great performance by him here.
Yeah.
Terry Schiavo.
Yeah.
I mean, Liv Schreiber.
Liv Schreiber.
Chris
Yeah.
Pine does such a good job of like setting up this version of Peter being an actual hero and like actually having that gravitas. And then
Yeah.
I love the contrast between Chris Pine's portrayal of Peter Parker versus Jake Johnson's portrayal of Peter Parker, Peter B. Parker. It's like so like heroic and cool and smooth. And then Jake Johnson is just so like kind of, I don't know, like he just woke up on your couch
Yeah.
Yeah. he's your
asking you if
buddy
you
who
could
has-
drive
Schlubby.
him to the store.
At
Yeah.
one point, you think he might be dead, decomposing on your couch. So you poke him with a stick and find out he's still alive. Miles narrowly escapes and runs home, where he gives his dad a big hug. And his mom asks if he was scared by the earthquake. And he asks if he can sleep there instead of at his dorm for the night. We see a news report saying that Spider-Man is dead, which breaks the hearts of basically everybody in New York. Miles buys a Spider-Man costume at a shop from Stan Lee and heads to a public wake at the Trinity Church, where Mary Jane tells the crowd that all of them have the ability to make a difference. Next, we see Ben Gates show up to find the Templar's treasure, which has been buried under that church since the 1700s, damn it. There's a lot of people here.
Peter Parker had to die, Ben.
He's got some stupid glasses. He's looking at stones and stuff.
He's looking at Peter's grave. It's buried here.
Buried here. Peter, Templar treasure.
By the way, like I've been to the Trinity Church a couple times now, and all of the graves there are from like the 1700s. So I don't find it plausible that they would bury Peter Parker there. I mean,
Maybe
I
they
guess
made
he's
an
a
exception.
hero, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
He's part of the Illuminati. They had to bury him there.
True.
Miles uses a bunch of Spider-Man comic books to try to figure out how to control his new Spider-Man abilities. He climbs to the top of a tall building where he stands on the ledge, but quickly chickens out and instead goes to the building next door. It's not quite so tall.
I love that shot. It's like just the shoes squeaking up the stairs and then squeaking down the stairs, then coming up a shorter building.
Yeah. He goes to jump from the building to another, but trips on his shoelace and slams into a taxi below, which breaks the device Peter gave him to deactivate the glider.
I love that like Miles is so fumbling and terrible at it, and then slowly gets a handle of it. Another cool detail that they added that I read was that when Miles is first introduced to us, and like he doesn't really have his powers and slowly is getting his powers. They did it in 12 frames per second, and slowly as the film goes on, they add more frames to him so that he's smoother, and by the end he's full 24 frames per second. But like at the beginning, if you watch, it's really glitchy, and that's
awesome.
Really cool.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Miles visits Peter's grave, where he apologizes for breaking his promise to use the USB stick to destroy the collider. But he's surprised by a guy in a trench coat, which is never a good thing, especially when you're a kid, who Miles electrocutes using a power he didn't know he had. Turns out this guy is also Spider-Man, and we see another quick montage of the Spider-Man's origin story. This is Peter B. Parker. Same thing. And aside from all the usual stuff we know about Spider-Man's origins, we tack on that he and Mary Jane got divorced. He made some bad investments, broke his back, cried in a bathtub, and gained like, seriously, 50 pounds. This is a way more relatable Spider-Man, in my opinion.
We've all been this Peter Parker before.
Don't invest in a Spider-Man themed restaurant. We see Peter get sucked from his universe to Miles through the Spider-Verse, where he sees that a younger, hotter, blonder version of himself died. And he realized whatever killed this Spider-Man must have brought him to this reality. We cut back to Miles attached to Peter B. Parker via a web, and Miles drags Spider-Man through the city while running from the cops and basically beats the absolute shit out of him while trying to save him.
Slamming him into every fucking thing the whole way through.
The other one died from Kingpin punching him. Why doesn't get hit by cars on a train
seriously.
Kill this one?
They're merely flesh wounds.
Act 2. Let's get some motivation up in this thing.
Peter wakes up to find himself tied to the punching bag we saw in Aaron's apartment earlier, and Miles asks why this guy looks like Peter Parker, except older, less blonde, and fat. Then Miles figures out that he's Spider-Man from a parallel universe, and Spider-Man tells him not to watch the mouth, but to watch the hands, which is the same thing that my proctologist tells me. And then he escapes out the window. Miles tries to reason with new Spider-Man, but Peter decides to bail until he starts glitching out, which causes him to fall down the fire escape. Miles tells Peter about the collider, and he reluctantly decides to take the kid under his wing, or leg, whatever spiders have under his leg.
One of the spiders got the wings.
He very reluctantly takes him under his wing, like screaming into his arm and stuff. No, don't do it. All right, kid, come on. This is our not quite a hero anymore Spider-Man, who becomes a hero again through the course of the film.
It's just like Spider-Man's always talking to himself in comics, so it's like that. He's still got that. He's arguing with himself over it because the hero in him wants to take the kid and protect him, and the old broken down is like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah,
but he still wins out.
Get back to that
part
pizza.
Still wins out. Yeah.
Peter B. Parker calls the USB that can stop the collider a goober, since like any kind of like device that fixes the thing that they're supposed to be destroying or whatever, he just calls a goober from here on out, and steals it from Miles before realizing it's broken. So they're all screwed unless he can steal the tech back that the dead Spider-Man previously stole. Peter says they don't have a second to lose, so they head to a burger place that is closed in this Peter's reality. I love this little scene. It's like sets the character's tone so well. He's just kind of a loser. Definitely doesn't want to help Miles, but it's still got those little elements of Spider-Man that make him great. They head to Alchemex on a bus, which I thought was also really funny. A research company that has been teased several times throughout the film. There was like a film playing in one of his classes. It says it on the USB stick, and it said it on the spider that bit Miles. They get suited up with Peter B. Parker wearing sweatpants and Miles wearing a cape. And we see that internet meme of Miles watching Spider-Man think about what he would do if he was the original Spider-Man or the original Peter Parker. I do hope that at some point we're going to get a little bit more of a time jump for Miles' character throughout these films. But spoilers, and Across the Spider-Verse, he's only like a year older. So He's still only like 15. Peter heads inside, leaving Miles to pout for a second before he spots Kingpin arriving at the lab. Miles sneaks inside to help Peter, who is annoyed initially, but realizes it's nice to have someone with him who isn't trying to kill him for a change. A doctor tries to warn Kingpin that they might open a black hole under New York if they fire up the collider again, but he doesn't care, of course. And Spider-Man sneaks in to get the files he needs off of a computer. Miles comes in after, but he can't figure out how to unstick himself from a light, which is a continuing theme throughout this whole thing of like he can't figure out how to control any of his powers until suddenly he just can, which I guess is the same thing that happened with Spider-Man, where he just suddenly, it just became instinct after a while. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Peter gives Miles his first lesson to relax, to harness his spider stickiness or whatever, which Miles does by singing to himself. Oh, and he turns invisible out of nowhere. So quite a few different abilities that Miles has that regular Spider-Man does not have. Falling from the ceiling makes a huge crash, which alerts the doctor, who comes into the lab, so Peter distracts her while Miles gets the files off the computer. Or, I mean, steals the entire computer since he can't find the files. He's just carrying the whole damn computer and the monitor while invisible. Doesn't really help. The doctor is over the moon to see Spider-Man since he's supposed to be dead, but we quickly find out that she has nefarious reasons for being interested in him since she's this reality's Doc Ock, which is Catherine Hahn, who crushes it and everything. I haven't watched the new Agatha series, but she was great in the WandaVision series. Yeah. She's always great. Mm-hmm. She strangles Peter while Miles makes a run for it with the computer. Miles runs directly into Gwen in the hallway. I guess she's like infiltrating the lab to try and find the files for herself. And when Peter gets away from Doc Ock, they head into a lunchroom where Peter steals a bagel that Miles throws at a guy's head, which somehow creates the bad guy for the next movie. But never mind that. I have a lot of questions about that, but it doesn't really matter. They had to set somebody up as the bad guy for the next movie. Peter gives Miles one of his web shooters, and they jump off the building while the bad guys shoot at them. Miles slowly starts to get the hang of it as Doc Ock gives chase, and he and Peter have a little bonding moment before Peter starts glitching out again. This gives Doc Ock the chance to catch up, and she takes back the computer. Suddenly, Peter and Miles get sucked into the trees by webs, and a new Spider-Man, or Spider-Girl woman, shows up dressed in black and white. She knocks out Doc Ock and takes the computer before joining Miles and Peter, who are shocked when they see that this girl is Gwanda from school. We then get treated to Spider-Gwen's origin story, where we find out she was bitten by a radioactive spider, joined a band, and wasn't able to save her best friend Peter Parker from dying after he transformed into Man-Bear Pig or whatever. They talk more about it in the sequel. Like he tried to become like a reptile or something. I don't know.
It was like that version's lizard.
Yeah,
that
I don't really know
lizard.
the Gwen Stacy story all that well, the Spider-Gwen version, but yeah, I know that Peter dies in that origin story. Anyway, she doesn't do and now she doesn't do friends anymore. I mean, doesn't have friends anymore. Also, she was sucked into this dimension the same way that Peter B. Parker was when the collider was activated. So in order to activate the collider, they have to use DNA from somebody. So like they used Kingpin's family originally, but then that never made it up there. Green Goblin pushed Spider-Man into the collider first, and that's where all of these versions came from. Her spider senses led her to Miles at his school, and the rest is history. The three of them thwip their way back to the city or to a bus. While we see Kingpin remember his family dying after seeing him as the monster that he is. You know, we get kind of Kingpin's motivations, which are well set up in a very quick scene. I feel like this film does really well what a lot of films don't do, is like setting character motivations without tons and tons of exposition and tons of buildup. Like you can You can set these things fairly quickly, but they're super necessary. Even if you only show for a second, it really gives you behind the motivations of a character. Like, Kingpin could just be a just evil character who's just doing this for whatever reasons, but we actually get to see why he's doing it, and it makes a lot of sense as to why he's doing it. Kingpin asks Doc Ock how the hell there are multiple spider people all of a sudden, and she says it means that the collider works and she can bring his family back from an alternate reality where they lived and don't know that he's a murdering psychopath. Miles, Gwen, and Peter make their way to this reality's Aunt May's house, who is dead in Peter B. Parker's reality. And this Peter is nervous to see her again, but then over the moon when he gets to see his aunt alive again. Aunt May is shocked to see him, but immediately knows that he's not her Peter. I'd make a joke, but I'm not going to. And calls him fat and makes fun of his sweatpants. A slightly better animated role for Lily Tomlin than Mamo in The Ant Bully. She's really good in this. It shows that she can be really good.
Yeah.
I mean, Lily Tomlin can be amazing. We've seen it before, but wow, they really just screwed her over with that Ant Bully role. She leads the spider trio to Peter's super fancy secret underground spider lair, which is filled with costumes, vehicles from the comics, and other spider people. Suddenly, 62 minutes into the film, we see Nic's character, Spider-Man Noir, as well as Penny Parker and Spider-Ham, a.k.a. Peter Porker, appear from the shadows. By the way, these are all real Spider-Man variants that all have had their own comic books over the years, or at least have made appearances in different things. Peter Porker is just really ridiculous. That character in general. But yeah, you had to add some levity to this otherwise sometimes a little bit heavy story.
Yeah. A spider bit by a radioactive pig that transforms into a spider pig.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Gwen, Miles, and Peter ask why Spider-Man Noir is in black and white and how his trench coat is flapping in the breeze when they're in a windowless basement. And he says,
"Wherever I go, the wind follows. And the wind, it smells like rain."
God, I hope he talks like that in the TV show, like it's in the Amazon series. Yeah. I really hope that that's being filmed in black and white. It seems like it's being filmed in black and white.
Yeah, that he's wearing like a brown trench coat and stuff, which is like...
Yeah.
Yeah, which you'd think he wouldn't be if it was filmed in color. You'd think they'd put him in black, but
yeah,
who knows?
And the way they did, like, there's that one shot where he's on the street and he's like laying on the ground and there's a spotlight on him, but it's like a yellow light. Yeah, I don't think you would ever do that unless you were filming in black and white because it's like brings out the highlights on the face in a different way. So I'm excited. I hope they do. I hope the whole thing is in black and white. I honestly hope it's filmed. Maybe not exactly, but like similar to how Sin City is, where it's like has that real like contrast black and white, comic book feel. We tell Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, and Penny Parker's origin stories the same way we did with the others. All were bit by spiders except Peter Porker, who was a spider that was bitten by a pig. Radioactive pig. In Noir's universe, it's 1933, and he's a private eye who fights Nazis. Penny is from New York in the year 3145 and has a psychic link with a spider that controls a mech suit that her father built. And Peter Parker frolics and he dances and he has things in his pants and et cetera, et cetera. You get it. Just a lot of those felt like John Mulaney ad-libs. They were actually encouraging John Mulaney to just improv in the booth, and most of his improvs involved cursing, and he eventually had to dial that back. They did apparently make a PG-13 cut of this film, but it hasn't seen the light of day yet. But that would be really fun to see Peter Porker cursing up a storm. Noir Spider-Man says the only way that they're all getting home is if one of them stays behind to destroy the collider after it's activated. And Miles says it has to be him, since if any of them stay, they'll die, since they're like breaking down, like their cells are breaking down on a molecular level because they're glitching in and out of this universe to another universe. And yeah. We haven't really established that yet, but like the longer they're there, the more they're going to glitch out. Spider-Man Noir asks who the kid is again, and Peter tries to get Miles to show off all of his cool powers, but of course, he still doesn't know how to control them. So the spider people have their doubts. Gwen vouches for Miles, and Spider-Man Noir says, "Okay, little fella, Kingpin's going to send a lot of mugs after you, and I'm talking hard boys, biscuit boxes. You think you can fight them all off at once?" It's like the one time he really goes full Humphrey Bogart. Then he tests Miles' reflexes by randomly tripping him and punching him in the face a bunch while saying, "Surprise attack!" They all bombard Miles with questions about whether he has what it takes to be a Spider-Man. And when he hears them all saying he's not ready for this, he turns invisible and leaves. It's about the worst thing that he could have done in that moment. It's just hightail it out of there. But, you know, I think he has his own self-doubt of whether or not he can do this, which he slowly gets it over time as we go through. Miles decides to head to his Uncle Aaron's for a shoulder to cry on / guidance, but when he gets there, his uncle's apartment, the Prowler shows up. And wouldn't you know it, the Prowler is his uncle. Miles is shocked and hightails it out of there, but Aaron hears him and gives chase again. Miles again manages to evade the Prowler, but we see the Prowler watching him go, so he tracks him. And we cut to Penny building a new goober for them to use to destroy the collider. The Spider Gang all wonder where Miles is, while Spider-Man Noir tries to figure out what the colors on a Rubik's Cube are, since he's now only ever seen black and white. Like great little detail. No, that's not purple. Spider Ham is just great in those little moments. Miles shows up to tell them the Prowler is his uncle, and Spider-Man Noir says, "This is a pretty hardcore origin story." Of course, by heading to Aunt May's, Miles led Kingpin and his gang straight to them, and Doc Ock busts through the front door. Scorpion and Tombstone show up, and Aunt May asks if they can take it outside, to which Spider-Man Noir says,
We don't pick the ballroom, we just dance.
That was great.
They proceed to destroy May's entire house, while the goober gets passed to all of the different spider people away from all the villains and stuff. It's a great little, I don't know, the setting of it being just in this like middle class house felt like it could have happened in the Family Man's house or something. They're just fighting in Jersey somewhere or Brooklyn or wherever they live. I think she lives in Queens, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Peter Parker's from Queens, right?
Yeah.
Miles eventually gets a hold of the goober and tries to run while Prowler beats the crap out of his nephew. On the roof, Prowler holds Miles by the neck, and when Miles takes off his mask, Aaron also takes off his mask and is shocked to see that the kid is his nephew. He lets Miles go, and Kingpin immediately shoots him for kind of sort of disobeying him for like a second, which seems pretty harsh. It's hard to find bad guys, you know?
Yeah, why is Kingpin just hanging out? Like,
yeah, he's just like sitting in the alley just watching the whole thing.
Just shoot him.
I'm going to shoot him if he
Why
lets
didn't
him
he
go.
just shoot Spider-Man?
Yeah.
That moment is so good, though. When
he recognizes
Aaron's
him.
like, no. Like, he knows that one of them's going to die now, and it's not going to be Miles. Like, he needs to make sure that Miles is safe. That's why he puts the mask back on him or whatever. And like,
Yeah, you get the sense that Aaron is a good guy at heart, but made some bad choices.
which is the theme of the movie. One of the themes.
Yeah, pretty much.
The choices.
Yeah. Which kind of seems like it's sort of the theme of the second movie is, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's your choices that make you who you are, you know. Miles swings off into the city while carrying his uncle, and in an alley, Aaron tells his nephew he's sorry he let him down and that Miles is the best of them and that he just needs to keep going. Aaron dies, and Miles' dad shows up to the scene to try and bust the little Spider-Man, but Miles turns invisible and leaves, and Jefferson finds his brother dead on the ground and puts an APB out on the new Spider-Man. There's a lot of great emotional pieces here. Especially throughout this part. I feel like they do such a good job in this film of the emotional weight of everything. Like, I feel like in comic book movies in general, they don't add any weight to death, which is like the heaviest thing that could happen to a person, and they just kind of breeze through it because it's just so commonplace and stuff. But like when you actually sit with an emotion for a second and actually can portray that on screen, it's so much more powerful.
And I feel like you have to do it to Spider-Man because that's the core of Spider-Man's character is some tragic death. I think it's one of the things that they didn't do with the MCU Spider-Man. Well, I guess eventually they did later, but it was one of the. I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword because like you don't really want to rehash it because you've seen it so many times and blah blah blah. It's like his Uncle Ben's dead. We know. Well, we never get that moment though with this. I mean, we sort of get one. I guess spoilers for No Way Home, but we never had that specific moment with the Tom Holland Spider-Man.
Yeah, so, it had already happened in that reality before.
It's not the same type of thing. That's not Peter's fault, and that's part of the core. What's the core to the Spider-Man character is Aaron and Ben. It's sort of his fault. You know, it's not really his fault with Aaron, or with either of them. But they feel that guilt that it was their fault. And so when you get that moment of seeing them actually die on screen, you can help get that emotional core to the character and connect to them. Really
motivates the reality of that character, and like you can see why they do the things that they do and what changes to make them become the hero. Miles loses it in his dorm and throws everything all around and stuff, but the Spider Gang show up to comfort him. They tell him that they all lost somebody on their journey to become Spider-Man, just like him. And Miles says something like, you know, you don't understand. It's like, yeah, we're the only people who understand. Then Miles' roommate shows up, so they all climb on the ceiling until he spots them and passes out. They kind of set this guy up as kind of the Ned character almost. Like Miles immediately reveals himself as Spider-Man later on to this guy when he like meets his roommate. Like he doesn't really know him. Which seems weird to me, but whatever. The Spider Gang decide that Miles isn't ready, and they all say goodbye. Peter B. Parker tests Miles to see if he can finally harness his powers, while the rest of the gang hang outside the window to see if he passes the test. But Miles fails to control his powers, so Peter uses his webs to tie Miles to a chair and takes the goober from him. Miles asks, "When will I know I'm ready?" And Peter says, "You won't. It's a leap of faith." And the Spider Gang all head off to the Collider while Miles watches them go.
Act 3. It's about time to wrap this thing up.
Jefferson shows up at Miles' dorm room to deliver the bad news about Aaron, but Miles can't respond since his mouth is spider-webbed shut. I'd make a joke, but I'm not going to cheapen the moment or this incredible movie.
It reminded me of like when Neo's mouth gets shut.
Yeah.
I'm not making the joke though. We all know what the joke is.
Jeff can see his son's shadow under the door, so he tells him the reason he pushes Miles so hard is because he sees so much potential in him that no matter what he chooses to do in his life, he will be great. Jefferson tells Miles he loves him, and this is finally the moment where Miles finds his strength. I think that he's got this whole thing of all these expectations placed on him, and he doesn't like it. He rails against it as any teenager would, but this is like he finally understands why everybody put all these expectations on him and that he can live up to them.
Yeah.
And he has to. He uses his electrical power to bust out of the webs, and he heads to Aunt May's where he gets her help to make a new suit. He heads to the top of a crazy tall building this time, and he takes a leap of faith and learns to control the web shooters to swing through the city to the Collider in the most badass scene in the film. The song is great.
Can't stop it now. Yeah, it's a rad sequence.
Yeah. Except they bust somebody's window to do it, which is kind of a dick move.
That's an office.
Meanwhile, the Spider Gang show up on a bus and sneak into Wilson Fisk's building to get to the collider under the building. It's just in this universe, no one ever cares. Like, it's not a big deal to see people dressed like Spider-Man on public transit. It reminds me of the
mech suit and a black and white Spider-Man and a pig.
It reminds me of the loading screen in the Spider-Man video game. The loading screens if you fast travel when he's like sitting on the subway reading his phone. Kingpin is having a fundraiser to celebrate Spider-Man for some reason, the night that he's doing this big experiment. And all the wait staff are dressed as him, so the gang sneak in as waiters, even though they don't look anything like this universe's Spider-Man, but nobody seems to care. So, whatever.
Tasteless, but respectable. I guess Spider Ham calls it out.
Peter B. Parker spots MJ and gets distracted. Like, why is MJ doing doing a talk at Kingpin's gala? I guess we'll get to it. It's one of my questions.
I sort of just skipped questions. I didn't really write any questions here, but this is one of my biggest ones. It's like, wouldn't Mary Jane know who Wilson Fisk is?
Yeah.
He's a bad guy.
Anyway, it's weird. Well, he gets distracted. She asks him for some bread, and he apologizes for not being there when she needed him with the bread. Underground Doc Ock is getting the collider ready, which has already been completely rebuilt. But like we said, Mary Jane would know that Wilson Fisk is a bad guy because
unless does this version of, well, no, she knows that he's Spider-Man.
Yeah, she gives the talk at his funeral, so it's kind of weird.
But she doesn't know who the bad guys are. I mean, she would know who Norman was and who Wilson Fisk was, and I don't know.
Yeah, and because Spider-Man knows who Fisk is when he fights him, so it's not like he didn't know that Fisk was a bad guy.
This is true.
So the team arrive at the collider just as it fires up again, and then they head out. They head in to put in the goober. Of course, they're spotted immediately because it's a big, well-lit, cylindrical room. And Doc Ock stops Peter from shutting the machine down. Just when things look grim, Miles shows up to save the day using Doc Ock's tentacles to punch her in the face while he's invisible. We see Miles in his final full costume form, and the team are all stoked that he at last knows how to control his powers on command. Peter tells him, "I love you. I'm so proud of you. Do I want kids?" Which, spoilers, kind of sets up his character arc in the sequel. The scientists find genetic matches for Fisk's wife and son in other dimensions, but they say it's too risky, to which Kingpin, of course, says, "Shut up and turn it up." It's like he's doing it while they're having this giant fight in the middle of his collider. Doesn't seem like the best plan, but
yeah,
he's that desperate, I guess.
He's so desperate to get his family back in any way possible that he'll completely destroy the entire planet and shatter every universe, all reality.
But even though last time this happened, it spawned a bunch of Spider-Man into it, so he could have had that happen again if another Spider-Man gets thrown into the collider this time, and he'd make his problems even worse. But buildings and buses and trains and all sorts of debris start showing up from inside the chamber from all these different New Yorks, I guess, and then they add to the chaos.
Yeah, even the Brooklyn Bridge shows up, and it's kind of crazy. I don't know that there would be that much space in there for all these things to show up. So
I guess that creates the question: did that just fuck over all these other universes' New Yorks by ripping big vehicles and people and cars and buildings straight into this thing to get smashed up?
I feel like the implication is that they would go back, but they would probably be smashed up in those other realities.
Yeah. They probably weren't empty trains. I mean, I guess the one that they were on was empty, but anyway, don't think about it. Spider-Man Noir fights Tombstone and calls him a hard-boiled turtle slapper. And we see Penny's robot get taken out by the Scorpion.
Penis Parker.
Spider-Man drops an anvil on his head, and then he, Penny, and Spider-Man Noir kick his ass.
Did that feel like a cartoon?
Gwen gets knocked out by Doc Ock, but Miles saves her and with Peter's help swings her up so she can punch Doc Ock in the face. They buckle up for a final big showdown, but Doc Ock gets hit by a semi-truck that's floating in the collider.
Which I'm guessing that didn't kill Doc Ock so she could show up again.
Probably not. Peter again insists on being the one who sacrifices himself, but Miles says he's got it and reveals that he stole the goober while saying, "Don't watch the mouth, watch the hands," which is what my wife's gynecologist always whispers in her ear before each exam. Miles smoothly swings around to the spot to insert the goober, showing us he's a full-blown Spider-Man now, while Gwen and Peter watch impressed. Penny is heartbroken to see her father's robot dead, but she retrieves the spider she has a psychic link with, and all of the Spider Gang head up to say goodbye to Miles. Kingpin loses it when he sees Miles has control of the collider and starts smashing stuff. The Spider Gang all say their goodbyes to Miles one by one, starting with Penny. Then Spider-Man Noir says,
I love you all. I'm taking this cube thing with me. I don't understand it, but I will.
Talking about the Rubik's Cube, of course. Which he had solved it.
Yeah, he solves it at the end, yeah.
Spider-Ham gives Miles a cartoon mallet, which I love.
It'll fit in your pocket.
It'll fit in your pocket. And Miles gives Gwen the same time as relative joke from when they first met before shaking her hand and asking if they can be friends. You know, since she doesn't do friends anymore. I mean, she doesn't make friends. You know.
Maybe finally, she does do friends.
Yeah. Finally, Peter B. Parker goes to say goodbye, but they're interrupted by Kingpin. Peter says he'll hold him off while Miles closes the portal, but Miles stops him and tells him he needs to go home. When Peter says he can't let Spider-Man die, Miles says, "Neither can I," and he trips Peter before grabbing him the same way Peter did to him in the dorm room. Miles says, "You got to go home, man." And Peter says, "How do I know I won't mess it up again?" before realizing it's a leap of faith. Peter heads back to his universe, leaving Miles to deal with Kingpin on his own. Miles jumps into a subway train floating through the collider, and Kingpin grabs Miles by the throat. Suddenly, Wilson's family appear and see him being violent and run away from him in fear once again while glitching in and out. Kingpin chases after them before busting out of the train to stop Miles from closing the portal. Miles' dad arrives in the control room, and we see the new Spider-Man battling Wilson Fisk in the collider. They go round and round for a bit, with Kingpin basically kicking Miles' ass before he tells Miles, "You took my family, and now I'm going to make sure you never see yours again." I could do a better Italian accent, but I'm not going to. Italian-American accent. Mafia boss accent. Uh-huh. Kingpin punches Miles the same way he did OG Spider-Man when he killed him in Act 1, but Miles gets up, fueled by the love of his dad and the echoes of the other Spider-Man saying, "Can you get back up no matter how many times you're hit?" And then he says, "I am all the Jedi." Now, actually, he tells Kingpin, "I'll always have my family. You ever hear of the shoulder touch?" And then he zaps Kingpin with his electrical power, sending him flying.
Hey.
Not sure why that works when Kingpin was like being hit by fucking trains and subway cars and stuff just fine, but whatever.
Yeah. They always make Kingpin so like unbelievably strong.
Yeah.
In the comics and stuff. I'm glad that they went with the real like, you know, comic book look of Kingpin, which is so unrealistic. Like there's this tiny head on this gigantic body, but it works for the comics. That's the cool thing about this is like they kept the original look of all of the different like Tombstone looks like Tombstone and not some fat bald guy like he did in the, and Scorpion and Green Goblin is a gigantic, you know, monster. And, it's like more accurate to the comics.
Miles catches him with his webs and throws Fisk into the building, stopping the collider, turning everything back to normal. The collider explodes, and we see Jefferson putting Tombstone into a cop car, which I just think is funny. It's like putting supervillains into a cop car.
Yeah.
Miles calls him, and they have a heart-to-heart about his Uncle Aaron, and Jefferson invites Miles to throw some of his graffiti up on the walls of the police station. Miles starts crying, and then he swings into the crime scene and hugs his dad while disguised as Spider-Man. Miles puts on a voice and says, "I look forward to working with you," and then tells him he loves him, much to Jefferson's confusion. What is this 5-foot-tall man telling me he loves me and then hugging me? Spider-Man tells Jefferson to look behind him, and we see Kingpin dangling from webs in the air with a note that says, "From your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." And then they put him in a cop car.
That's kind of what they did in Daredevil. They just kind of put him into a regular jail cell. And
The Daredevil Kingpin wasn't like super strong strength man, whatever. Finally, we see the same style origin story montage we got with the other Spider People, where we see that Miles has finished his big essay, saved a bunch of people, spray painted a mural in honor of his uncle with his dad, and we see that the Spider People in their respective universes, with Penny building a new robot, Spider-Man Noir having solved the Rubik's Cube, Peter Porker eating a hot dog, which is pretty messed up, Gwen looking at the photos of she and Miles together. When did they take photos? Anyway, and Peter trying to make things right with Mary Jane.
there was apparently a joke from Peter Porker in the scene where they talk about all of them losing somebody, and like he says something about like losing a friend who's a ham, and he ended up like smelling him being cooked or something, and like they were like, everybody laughed their asses off in that scene, but it ended up taking everybody out of the emotion that they were trying to get. He smelled delicious.
We see Miles listening to music in his bedroom, just as we did when we were first introduced to him. But this time the ceiling opens up and Gwen asks if he's got a minute. I got to say, unexpectedly dropping in above a 14-year-old's bed is pretty risky business, but I guess that's part of the hero life. The end. Now, wait. We get to hear part of Spider-Man's Christmas album during the credits, and we see Spider-Man 2099 show up at the end of the credits to tease a story that would eventually become Across the Spider-Verse. Oh, and we get to make a joke where multiple Spider-Men point at each other from the memes. The end.
That's the first
1960s Spider-Man cartoon.
Interdimensional jump that he makes is to the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon.
Complete with that super deep Spider-Man voice. That's so weird.
Who are you?
A 50-year-old man to play Spider-Man in that.